What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video. And today I am super excited to have Mr. Christopher Tin with me on the call. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I really do appreciate it. And if you don't know who Chris is, he has worked on a bunch of concert music, video game music, film music. He's also an arranger. So he has done a lot of stuff over the course of his career. And I'm just, super excited to have him on today to get a bit of his insight into, working in the industry today and how it is as a musician, as a composer, and just ask some specific questions regarding working in music and how it all comes together. So Chris, thank you very much for having or taking the time to spend some time with me today. And if you just wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit and kind of letting us know, your very beginnings, getting started in music, and then kind of how you got up to this point, just a very, light summary, because you've had quite a great career so far. So yeah, thanks again.
Okay, so in brief, I started, studying, I studied at Stanford, did my undergrad there, and then I did my graduate degree at the Royal College of Music in London, and they have a film scoring program there called the M.Mus in Composition for Screen course. And so I moved to LA after finishing that up, and that was in about the year 2000 or so, and I started working around town for various composers, guys like Hans Zimmer, Joel McNeely, Michael Brook, John Ottman, Marco Beltrami, a couple others, just, as an assistant. Gradually, I worked my way up to orchestration, additional music, orchestration, things like that. Maybe around 2003 is when I struck out on my own, started doing my own projects. I got more ghostwriting gigs at that point on major studio films. My big break came in 2005. I was asked by my former Stanford roommate if I would be interested in writing a new song as the menu theme song for the game Civilization 4. I said yes, of course, because that's a game that I've played actually all my life. And so it was really great to be able to be a part of that franchise. I wrote a song called Baba Yetu, which features African vocals with orchestra and taiko drums and other, cinematic sweeping elements to it. That song became very popular in the video game industry and really just sort of spread around like wildfire. The sheet music for that got published by Alfred Publishing, and suddenly that became kind of a hit in the choral community as well. In 2009, I re-recorded that song along with 11 other songs on my debut album, an album called Calling All Dawns. It was recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and various soloists from around the world. That album won 2 Grammy Awards, and Baba Yetu won a Grammy that night, which made Baba Yetu the first video game song, piece of music from any video game, really, to win a Grammy Award. And then I followed that up with another album in 2014, started increasing my live music engagements. I started regularly doing concerts at places like Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall, sometimes conducting them myself, sometimes leading it to others to conduct. Just this past year, I signed with Decca, the famous classical label that's part of Universal Music Group. My next album comes out with them August 21st. It's called To Shiver the Sky, and it's an oratorio about the history of flight. And what I've done with that album is I've actually taken the song that I wrote for the game Civilization 6, a setting of Leonardo da Vinci's writings on flight called Sogno di Volare. And I've re-recorded that with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and the Royal Opera Chorus, and written another 10 tracks to go with that. And that album is coming out in a couple of weeks.
Amazing.
And that's kind of the 2-minute version of my career right there.
Well, that was beautiful. That was concise. That was very substantive as well. So I wanted to ask you about your experiences working as an assistant and starting out in the industry. So working for these guys in different positions and doing different work, how do you think those kind of, helped you with your experiences in the industry? Did you learn any major lessons along the way, or did they prepare you in any way for what came more in the future? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are wondering about working in the industry and what that's kind of like. Do they have to be an assistant for someone else or intern for another composer? What kind of process was that like for you?
I sort of think there's a lot to be learned by working for other composers. I mean, for one thing, unless you go to a program where it's like a feeder program and you're connected with a lot of people and you have sort of work coming straight out of school, you're kind of you're not going to have a ton of opportunities in LA, right? In Hollywood, when you're first out of school. There are some programs like USC that are very good at pairing you up with people. And if you're lucky, you will develop a relationship with somebody and you'll start working right out the gate. All of my connections were in London. I mean, I was already working for a record company, doing arranging even before I graduated. It was a British record company called Silver Screen Records, but it was, it was regular work, right? Sadly, that did not translate to connections in LA. So when I came to LA, what I had to do was, basically look around for work. And ultimately, getting work with some of these big name composers was what got me through the early months and actually got me on board a lot of projects. I mean, aside from that, though, I think you can learn so much from working for another composer. And it almost doesn't matter who you work for. You're just going to learn a lot that you will never learn, taking your courses in college or whatever. I mean, a lot about the real way the business works, the real pressures, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, just, how the sausage is made, right?
Yeah.
Like that is just a glimpse into that world that you're gonna get that you can't get in school. They just do not teach that in school. And
Right.
depending on who you work for, it's going to be a very different sort of education. I mean, I worked for, like, my first internship was for Hans Zimmer, right? That was very tech heavy, very, very, it gives you a glimpse of how it's done at the highest level in Hollywood, right? But conversely, like being an assistant for a great composer like Joel McNeely, who's sort of old school, right? And who would actually do things pencil and paper, which isn't really done much anymore. My job with him was to take all his pencil paper sketches and actually synthestrate them all, right? To make mock-ups for all the executives at Disney to listen to. And by doing that, I learned a lot about orchestration, right? Because there's nothing quite like transcription as a learning exercise, I think. Much of my early work was transcription work or synthestration work, where I was looking at notes and I was writing things down and ultimately getting a chance to hear them recorded by an orchestra. That really gives you a glimpse into writing for a live ensemble.
Right.
So I recommend it. I mean, and in a way, like, depending on who you work with, you're going to have a very different experience. Like the people who work for me have a very, very different experience than the people who work for, say, Hans or Barry McCreary or Trevor Morris or those guys, right? It's very, very different. Depends on the composer.
Right. I think the most important thing is that there's always something to learn. And even if, like you said, every composer is a little bit different, the experience you get from that is invaluable. So regarding the composing itself, I'm sure at this point, if you could put into a couple of sentences your own signature sound, you could probably do that. But for a lot of composers out there who are just getting started, they love so much music and there's so many styles they're interested in getting into. So how important would you say is it to really hone in on your particular sound? And is it better to kind of focus on just like one particular genre of music or one that like you carved out for yourself rather than spreading yourself out too much and, being a jack of all trades, if you will? Like how important is it to really solidify your own direction early on versus maybe experimenting with other genres? What would you say?
I don't think you need to solidify it early on. In fact, I think it's detrimental to try to solidify it early on because you don't know who you are as a composer early on. You're just out of school. You've got a lot of skills. You have a lot of tricks and tools in your toolkit and stuff like that, but you don't know how to quite put them together. And really, who are we in our 20s? Do we really have a sense of who we are as people? In a way, we don't have enough life experience to sort of understand that, right? And in a way, you just need to be writing whatever will get your music out the door or whatever people will pay you to write. So while I think honing in on certain elements of what your style are very important early on, it shouldn't be the sort of thing that you lose sleep over. I think your style will emerge the more you write music. The more you write, the more you're going to start doing things a certain way. That eventually becomes your style. It also depends whether you're talking about going into being an artist or are you going into being a media composer. Because if you're going into being a media composer, depending on what the project is, you can be asked to do any number of different things. I mean, early on, I was very much a commercial composer, right? And I wrote a lot of, music for high-end brands like, Puma, for example, or Guess, right? Clothing brands. And depending on the spot, I could be writing a bossa nova, I could be writing a hip hop track, I could be writing an orchestral track, I could be writing, whatever, right? Whatever that particular spot happened to demand. And you need to be able to flex all those different muscles. Ultimately, all those different muscles will kind of come together and become your style. You will assimilate all these different elements of what you're writing, and they will shape the music that you choose to write as an artist yourself. But I don't think you can just kind of sit down and say, okay, here's my style. So I'm going to take, 12-tone music, and I'm going to, graft it onto spectralism, and then throw in some like big band arranging chops, and then by the way, there are going to be beats under it, right? And here's my modular synth, right? It's just, you can't just like throw together elements and just kind of expect something to come out of it. It's the most unnatural way of finding your style. The way of finding your style is just to write a lot of music, and then over time, you're going to see patterns in what you write, and that's your style.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, just experimenting with different styles. And I feel like I'm still at that point as well. I'm almost 25. So I feel like, there's a lot of music to still listen to. Of course, there's more music every day. So, just immerse ourselves into as much as possible to learn from it. And speaking about big band, actually, that's how I discovered you, first of all, through your arrangement for, Crazy Rich Asians. So I'm just curious. I wanted to ask you about that. How was that experience for you? And was it daunting at all? I'm sure it was a lot of fun. But how did that come about? And have you written any like jazz stuff since? Any charts or anything?
That was my one and only ever time of writing a big band chart. I mean, I want to do it again. I think it was a blast. I had so much fun doing it.
Yeah.
I'd never written a note for saxophones before that. I mean, it just wasn't my thing. I mean, not to say I don't have the jazz chops. I mean, I actually played bass in a lot of jazz combos growing up, and I just had some rudimentary piano jazz chops as well, but not great, right? But I grew up listening to a lot of jazz, so it's not foreign to me. When I was putting that chart together, I was able to bring in some elements from other genres of music that I happen to have loved all my life. There are a lot of those, call and response licks that are frankly very sort of like 70s funk. We're talking Earth, Wind and Fire or Tower of Power, right? There's a lot of stuff that's sort of fun like that, that's borrowed more from the funk world than it is from the jazz world. And likewise, there's this whole passage in the middle where I have the strings basically playing a fugue chord, right?
Yeah.
That, just transplanting a little bit from my classical education into this new medium was in my mind a sort of fresh way to put my own creative stamp on this too, so it doesn't sound like a Gordon Goodwin chart or a Chris Walden chart or a Jorge Colandrelli chart or something like that. They have their things that they do. I have my things that I do, and the things that I do have to be organic to who I am as a person. That happens to be a guy who happened to love funk growing up as a kid, and loved classical music, right?
Yes.
So, I want to do more. Absolutely, I love big band. I think it's a lot of fun, and to be able to do it on a major hit film like that. And to find some fresh way of doing it. That is taking an old Shanghai jazz tune from the 30s and then reinventing it for modern big band. That was a lot of fun. Right. And, if I were to do more big band music, maybe that is my angle into that market, right? Yeah. Taking a bunch of old Chinese folk tunes and then jazzing the hell out of them, right? I mean, maybe that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That gig came around because my agent found out that Warner Brothers was doing Crazy Rich Asians and said, hey, why don't you put together a little pitch for that, right? And so my wife and I actually put together a very elaborate pitch involving, a special presentation box that was tied into the plot of the movie itself. And then I had actually written some spec music that I proposed, for the director, and he really latched onto this one big band piece that I sort of spec'd up, and they hired me to flesh it out and make it a full-on track and put it in the movie. So
awesome.
It was a blast.
Wonderful. That's, I mean, I just think jazz is such a fun art form in itself. And I think when listening to that arrangement, everyone can tell that you had a blast writing it, and the musicians had a wonderful time playing it and everything. So, I mean, me listening to it for the first time, I would have never guessed it was your first chart. So it was awesome. So I want to ask you a question that I feel like a lot of composers have, at the top of their minds, which is, do the really famous and prestigious composers today, do they use a lot of sample libraries to do their mock-ups, or do they generally kind of maybe just use sound fonts and then give it to an orchestrator or something to put later? So I want to ask you if you use sample libraries frequently, and if you do, what are kind of your favorites, and like how many do you usually use at once? Or do you have a lot? What's kind of your process with libraries, and how do you kind of see them as a tool to help composers write music?
Well, it just depends on the composer. I mean, I know some composers are so good at manipulating samples, and samples are their way of communicating their desires in music. Like, Hans Zimmer talks about this a lot. Like the studio is his instrument in a way. Like he knows how to really, really produce samples. And there's no black magic to it. I mean, like you can take any sample library and, maximize its benefit and make it sound really good. Sample libraries are very good these days, right? Like Danny Elfman played me a sampled string quartet that he had sort of mocked up. And I thought it was a real string quartet. I mean, he's really, really good at this sort of thing, right? I tend not to put a ton of time into mocking up my mock-ups, especially if I know that there's a chance that they're going to be, recorded later on. I mean, for one thing, I think the process of really polishing samples and making them sound good consumes time, right? There's nothing worse than, okay, I've just written this thing. It took me 30 seconds to come up with this melodic line. Now I got to spend 5 minutes to make it sound good on samples. Exactly. And there goes your workflow, right? Yeah. I don't want my workflow to be bogged down by any technicalities. I just want to be able to throw ideas down, massage them, work out the counterpoint, work out the voicings, move on to the next thing, actually write the music, not, produce it while I'm writing. I want to be thinking of writing and thinking melodically and structurally and contrapuntally and harmonically and rhythmically. Those are the important things in my mind. Yes. Later on, polishing up samples, anyone can do. I can give my Logic sessions to anyone and they can sweeten them, they can make them sound good if there's truly no live orchestra to record them later on. But I really don't think that, I personally do not want the production of samples to interfere with my creative process. I'd rather write quickly, get the music done, get it out there so I can write the next piece, because honestly, there's a lot that needs to be written. And I don't want to be bogged down by technical stuff. Interesting. That's me. Yeah. Other people love it. Other people are like, I'm going to find the sample. I'm going to produce the hell out of that. It's going to sound so good. Yeah. We don't need to record a live orchestra because it's going to sound that good. Right. And maybe they have a dozen sample libraries at their fingertips, I know, to go back to the Danny Elfman example, I mean, he's got like racks and racks of outboard computers with every single library known to man loaded up on them and ready to go. I think a lot of the other media composers are like this. They've got enormous templates. I don't want an enormous template, and I don't want racks and racks of dedicated, farm, like a sample farm, right? I don't want that. Yeah. I want all of my stuff in one session. I have all of my samples loaded up in an individual contact. Every articulation of every sample gets its own contact instead, basically. So basically, I have Logic sessions that have 60 to 70, tracks, each with their own contact instrument, and one single sample loaded up in each one of them, and I just make do with that. I really don't need, to layer 5 different string staccato patches. I don't need to do that necessarily. Right. I'm not in, say, the trailer game where you want everything to sound so thick and like massive, and it just eats up all the air in the room. And I don't really go for that. Right. I think you can get a lot of mileage out of just being smart about how you write for the instruments and where you put them in their register. And you want a bit of transparency. You don't want it to sound like there's 5 string orchestras laid on top of each other. You've got your string orchestra doing, your ostinato. You got your string orchestra doing the soaring violin line over the top. You got your string orchestra doing your pads in the middle, and your string orchestra doing like a trailer effects and stuff like that. That's unnatural. It's an unnatural sound. Sure. Everything I write, I assume that at some point somebody might want to play it live. And so I do not write orchestral pieces in a unrealistic manner. Right. Everything I write, all the instruments are assigned to their proper registers. There are no weird balance issues. Everything's thought about as if I could plop this in front of an orchestra and it'll get played live in some video game music concert somewhere or something like that. But
Yeah.
it is just a way of saving myself some time, because
Yeah.
if you arrange, right? If you've ever tried to take a track which is so clearly 5 different sampled string orchestra
Yeah.
libraries laid on top of each other, how do you perform that live?
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
It's
do
tough. Yeah.
divisis with each section, and you have like half your verse doing the octave,
Right.
half your verse doing it just makes chaos. And what
Sure.
I found is most of the music I write tends to eventually get a live performance, and so I err on the side of making everything work for real musicians.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So like if your music is going to be performed at the end, there really is no point in spending a lot of time with the mock-up and trying to make it as realistic as possible. So it's like vice versa with mock-up only people. They actually have a reason to spend a lot of time on their sessions. So it's all about the end product. Just a two-part question here. So regarding your creative process, when you're starting to write a new piece of music, generally, do you start with like a melody or a chord progression? Do you start with like a feeling in mind when you're writing a new piece? And I guess it also kind of depends on the desired output as well. Like which form of media are you writing for? Is it video games or is it film? And so in regards to that, how does your approach kind of differ from writing for like a film, let's say, versus a video game? So like what kind of takes the important parts when you're writing for a film versus a game? Like what do you focus on more when you're writing for those mediums? I don't know if
Well, I
that
don't
makes
think
any
it.
sense. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it makes a difference whether it's a film or a game, as much as a difference between whether it's a concert piece or a film or game score, right?
Okay.
I mean, generally speaking, I tend to sketch just on piano, and what I'll do is I'll load a piano patch in Logic, and I'll just hit record, and I'll turn off the metronome, and I'll just let it run for an hour, and I'll just this
Yeah.
sucks. Oh, this sucks. Oh, this sucks. This really sucks. You're a
Yeah.
terrible composer, Chris. Why don't you just give up now? Oh, this is okay.
Yeah.
Let's explore this, right?
Yeah.
So there is a long process of just trying out different things and throwing ideas out, right? And this goes back to this idea of not interrupting your own creative flow. Like, I don't want to interrupt my creative flow by having a metronome ticking in the background to remind me how truly crappy my timing is, when I'm playing to a click, right? I just want to let it run and record, and I'll just try out a few things and worry about sorting them out later. I don't want to worry about samples. I don't want to worry about whether this sounds good. I just want to come up with some good musical ideas.
Right.
And sometimes that just takes a 1-minute piano exploratory session where maybe in minute like 55, you come across something that's actually promising, but you couldn't have gotten there without, throwing out terrible ideas for the first. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's for concert pieces. It tends to be very much focused on finding really good musical ideas. When you're scoring something, first of all, your schedule is a lot more compressed. You don't have the time, you don't have the time to come up with innovative ideas. Maybe you start to lean a little more on ideas that you've done in the past that the director may have attempted something with, because that's kind of what they want. So why bother throwing something that they don't want at them? I tend to just start writing with samples. I just start diving in with the orchestra, right? And it's not, I mean, it's not like, I don't think the piece suffers because I don't have this extra step of like trying out different musical ideas on the piano. I mean, in a way, the product that you're given, the film or the game or whatever, is that sketch phase. It already tells you what you need to come up with musically and dramatically. And not to mention, your musical ideas don't have to stand on their own when they're in support of a film or a game. Matter of fact, a lot of times they don't want your musical ideas to pull attention from what's going on screen, right? Sometimes you're just there to apply a little bit of dramatic sauce to a filmic moment, and all you need to do, if all the film is calling for, is just a few like understated strings, a little bit of motion, and a keyboard instrument or a harp or something like that. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, that's great. just got a couple more questions here. So this is more of like a nerdy question, but I also read that you worked with Lang Lang, and you already mentioned Danny Elfman, and also you worked with Alan Menken. So these are all guys I'm sure we're all familiar with, all wonderful musicians. So how did those opportunities come about, like with Lang Lang, and I'm especially interested with Alan Menken because everyone knows his music, and then and Danny Elfman as well.
Some of it comes through my agents, Craft Angle. Like, one of the things that they do a lot, which they do very well, is such and such legendary composer needs someone to help him write such and such.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
let's get,
Cool.
such and such younger composer and have him work with this legend, and right. Everyone benefits, right?
Gotcha. Very cool.
So a lot of those opportunities come from just being kind of plugged into that pool.
Right.
The Lang Lang thing was a little bit different. Like I knew the head of music from the Weinstein Company back when the Weinstein Company existed, right? We served on the Grammy board together, doing advocacy work for the musician community, which is something that is an interest and a passion of mine. And they were doing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Sword of Destiny, which is a sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Right.
And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is one of these scores where back when I was a grad student in London, they hired me, Silver Screen Records hired me to do a transcription of this score and to make a concert suite so that, orchestras could play the suite from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah.
So I made this little concert suite that's floating out there somewhere. The head of music at the Weinstein Company, for some reason, got a hold of this concert suite when they were doing their new Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, saw my name on it, said, what, this is so weird. Why is Chris's name on this?
Right.
Called me up and said, here's the deal. I just saw that you did this thing. We have Lang Lang in the studio in 2 days' time in New York, and he's willing to play some stuff for the new Crouching Tiger. And I thought, hey, I know you're very familiar with the original score. You did this concert suite. Could we hire you to do a solo piano arrangement of the original Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon music by Tom Dunn for solo piano for Lang Lang? And by the way, he has 48 hours to do this arrangement and be in New York with him to record it, right? So it's like, okay, all right, sure. And by the way, I'm in Nashville when this is all happening. I'm doing recording sessions for a Disney project. I'm in front of an orchestra at Ocean Way. I'm doing that. And I'm like, okay, cool. We book the flights, fly to New York, write the arrangement, in hotel rooms, on the plane, in the taxi, into Manhattan. I mean, just do it as fast and as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And we go and we do the session, and of course it's amazing. And by the way, his agent, he's used to Lang Lang not being utilized to his full potential.
Okay, right.
Film scores, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
just, a little melody and octaves or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, can you give my boy something meaty to play with here?
Right.
It's like, all right, no problem, right? Okay, so here's this, this long extended trill passages, where he's doing this, the melody.
like Campanella or whatever.
Yeah, because as you know, the original, it's Yo-Yo Ma playing cello, right?
Right.
It's a lot of sostenuto.
Sure.
So what do you do for a piano for all that sort of stuff, right? It's a lot of single line sostenuto stuff. You got to get creative. So okay, so I gave all sorts of cross rhythms and quintuplets and all that stuff.
Amazing.
And then the long trilling passage.
Yeah.
Hands crossing over, under and over.
That's great.
And of course,
awesome.
you just blow through all of it, right?
Yeah.
And honest to God, the most stressful moment for me that whole project was being his page turner.
Oh my goodness.
The booth, right? Because I don't know if you've ever been a page turner.
Oh yeah.
I hate that job. It's the worst thing in the world because I don't have the focus, especially if it's one of my tracks and I'm sitting next to the greatest pianist in the world, to be like, okay, I got to turn the page now. I'm just like,
he's playing my music?
Shit. Like, what is happening? I'm sitting here. He's next to me. He's sight reading the hell out of this thing, right? And then suddenly it's like you forget to turn the page, and of course his hands are.
Yeah.
Like, oh
That's
shit, I just
hilarious.
totally fucked this up, right?
Yeah, that's so funny. Oh my gosh.
I'm never going to be a page turner ever again. And everyone I know has a horrible story about being
Oh
a page
yeah,
turner.
I do
It's
too. Yeah,
miserable. It's so
it's
stressful,
tough. It's
right?
tough. Yeah,
It's the
absolutely.
weirdest thing because all you got to do is you got one task, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
everyone screws it up at one point or another, right? You got one task,
Oh
and you just lose yourself in the moment in the music, and you forget to do
yeah,
your task. That's just
that's
what happens.
hilarious. That's so funny. Oh
So
my gosh.
anyway, that's my experience with
Yeah,
that.
no, that's wonderful. One more question here. So, you went to music school, and you, I guess, made a lot of connections there, and I'm sure you got some wonderful experiences there. So, a lot of my friends personally, I went to music school as well for piano performance and everything like that. But going in this composing direction, it's something completely different. So, I wouldn't say going to school for that program specifically helped me with arranging or whatever like that. But if a composer, let's say they want to do this for a living, how much would you recommend going to school for, I guess, composing or film scoring or whatever, versus making a presence online or making themselves known in the community as much as possible? So, like, is it necessary to go to school to learn those skills? Do you think it's possible to learn it all just by practicing and transcription, like we mentioned, and everything like that? So, what do you think is like the balance there, and how much
I
of
think it's a
a
broad question, and it's sort of, I mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry, you broke up
Sorry.
just a
Yeah,
little,
I know.
so I
Sorry.
didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
no
it's
worries.
okay. I mean, generally speaking, it depends who you want to be as a composer, going forward. Do you just want to score films? I mean, like, you don't necessarily need to go to a film scoring program to score films. They teach you some things, but a lot of those things you could learn on your own, reading a few books, watching some YouTube tutorials. I feel like that's probably a thing that's out there now that didn't exist when I was going through school. Like, just the ability to watch people explain some basics. I mean, that is a powerful tool that I think is out there now. I mean, you would know better than I, like, are there channels that are like how to be a film composer, how to write like John Williams, how to write like Hans Zimmer. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of stuff out there.
Yes.
If you want to be a composer for concert music, you should go to school. I mean, it helps because, as we know, it helps to not only understand the inner workings of music theory and composition and orchestration, but also things like conducting are important skills that feed into the whole package of who you are as a composer. Knowing the repertoire, knowing the canon, that's kind of an important thing, right? A lot of that happens through just being exposed to it, right? And there are a lot of pieces that that had a huge influence on me. A lot of composers that had a huge influence on me that I never would have studied had I not done like a composition course, right?
Right.
So it just sort of depends who you want to be. Like, do you want to be a composer who's also like a pop producer? I mean, it's probably better that you actually just start producing tracks, and working with singers and stuff like that. I mean, do you want to be, who do you want to be, right? Do you want to perform as well? I mean, it doesn't ever hurt to go to school, except for the debt that you rack up coming out of school.
Yeah.
If there's no real good answer to this, it just depends on your circumstances and how you learn best. Some people thrive in a school environment. I thrive in a school environment. I love it. Other people don't. They shouldn't go to school. If you're not going to thrive in school, don't do that. But there is no answer to this that will immediately close off all doors for you, right? There are maybe some doors that might get closed off if you decide not to get a formal education, but those might not be doors that you want to go to anyway. Like, do you want to go into academia? If not, then you maybe don't want to get a PhD in music theory or something like that, right? I mean, I don't think there are a ton of wrong ways to go about choosing your exact path.
Right.
But whichever path you choose, whether it's self-learning or school, I think you should maximize it. And ultimately, it comes down to how disciplined are you? How devoted and dedicated to your craft are you? Because if you're not, there are about 100 other people out there with more dedication than you. And they are going to go further in their careers than you are just because they hustle a lot harder. And this is a business about hustle. You can't coast through this business, no matter who you are.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, I can personally speak from experience. It's like, yeah, I don't have a degree in arranging or composition or anything. But I think after, I mean, getting a classical degree from the University of Toronto, it definitely gave me a little bit of credibility for teaching piano. But aside from that, for arranging and things like that, I wouldn't have any of the gigs at all if I didn't have a YouTube channel or have some of my work out there to, you know, demonstrate for those people. So, like Chris said, any opportunity you have to like work at your craft in whichever direction you choose, I think it is very, very important to dive all into that. So yeah, thank you again, Chris. It really means a lot to chat with you, and I'm sure the people watching had an awesome time listening to your thoughts and everything and your expertise. So you mentioned To Shiver the Sky's coming out the 21st. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
August
Perfect.
21st on Universal, Decca
Wonderful.
Gold.
Awesome. And is it going to be available like for streaming on Spotify and everything? Like people can find it pretty easily anywhere. So
Yeah, it'll be like anywhere you can find music, it's going to be there.
awesome.
Basically.
Okay, perfect. Well, definitely excited to hearing that. Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Chris, again for being with us here today.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
Awesome.
Yeah,
all right. See everybody in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.